Hey, how you doing? All right, let's do it to it. All right, analyze the games. This is Frank J. Marshall, Best Games of Chess. This is Montreal, Quebec, 1893. Another early game which I won from H.N. Pillsbury, the American champion. However, Pillsbury was playing in a simul exhibition and was blindfolded. This is the kind of game which is very difficult to play blindfolded. So I play white. Pillsbury is white, and Marshall is black. So d4, d5, pawn c4, knight knight to f6. An inferior move which permanently permits white to gain control over the central, actually over the center. E6 would have actually potentially been a better move. E6 would have been better, kind of setting up a French line, or a Slav type of setup with C6 would have been much better for black. It would have given black a little bit more control. This isn't. Pawn takes, and then rather than knight takes because he's going to get pushed back, queen takes, and then knight to c3, attacking the queen. Queen goes all the way back to d8. Black loses a tempo as the result of this second move. Pawn to e4. Boom. That's now Pillsbury controls the center. Knight to f3 would have permitted black's next counter move. Would have actually prevented knight f3 would have prevented black's next counter move. E4, and then pawn to e5, which is a counter strike. But if he had played knight f3, that prevents this because you then could just grab it with your knight. So you have to always weigh the move orders. Offering the sacrifice of a pawn which, if captured, can't be held. So he plays pawn. Pillsbury plays d5. There's nothing better if pawn takes pawn, queen takes queen, check, king takes, because you have to hold on to this. So king has to take at this point. And then knight to g5 with the idea of this here, with this and this. So the king would have to actually come back, and then you pick up the pawn. Hey, how you doing? So that's why he pushed d5 instead of winning the pawn. Bishop to d6 is played to kind of hold this pawn, and it's not the, in my opinion, the most optimum placement of the bishop. But this is a young Marshall, so it was 1893. He played pawn f4, pawn takes. White loses a pawn without any compensation. Pillsbury was taking chances as he was playing against an inexperienced youth, or he may have been giving me an opportunity. Masters sometimes do that in a simul exhibition, so that they sometimes will do this to give their opponents kind of a chance, but you never really want to do this, even if you're doing Pillsbury's white and he's playing a blindfold exhibition against Darcimo, and he's playing against a young 16-year-old Marshall. So you don't give Marshall a that type of a an advantage. He's going to cause a lot of chaos in your position. Bishop knight 5. So now he's attacking the knight here. Pins the knight and prevents the advance of White's pawn to e5 to attack, because this is pinned. But bishop to bishop queen d3 protects the pawn and still allows the potential for castles to retrieve the f4 pawn. Knight to rook 4 here to hold on to the pawn. Black begins a strong attack. His last move clears the way for the queen, placing the knight in a strong position, and guards the pawn a second time. Hold on, did I let me see here, I want to make sure I did. Let me see. Uh-oh, my bad, I moved the bishop to the wrong spot. It's not bishop B, it's bishop G4. This is I knew there was a hiccup in the position there. I'm reading English notation, so it's I know how to read it. It's just I haven't done it in a while. I'm used to algebraic notation, so to transcribe it over is sometimes a little difficult. Knight h5. The older books are set in English notation, and the modern books have algebraic notation on their writings. So like it would actually say knight yeah, yep. So the algebraic would actually say knight h5, and the English would say knight to h4, knight king h4. It's knight rook 4 with a line. Well, if you learn it, it opens a lot of doors for the older books to be used, and so I kind of had to improve my rating and stuff to get dive into the older books. I had to learn that, but I haven't used it in a while because the majority of the modern ones are good too. played against somebody who actually did the English notation, so it was interesting how the player wrote that. So white castled, and then bishop to c5. It was actually bishop, bishop check, bishop b4 check with a line, forcing the king into a corner where he can be checked by a knight in a later stage of the combination. Excuse me. King to rook 1. See, the idea is they want to set up a knight going to f2, which would be a type of smother mate setup. Because then what you could do is bring a knight here, and then potentially bring the queen in, the rook takes, and then you come back and smother mate. So he's going to try to set, the young marshal is going to try to set up basically a smother mate type of setup. Queen to f6, knight to e2. He's trying to shuffle his pieces over and see if he can't cause some. He's also clogging up this so that he has the ability to, at this moment, he could push this pawn, because the bishop would take, but I guess the queen could take at that point too. It's kind of debatable. This does free up this knight here, this one. This move does. Forcing forced black's threat of knight to g3 check, followed by he can't take. So let me see here. Hold on. Oops, my bad. Sorry, I was a little too ahead of myself. A little too ahead of myself there. Knight pawn. This g5 holds. Queen to b2, and finally gets out of the pin. So now there's a pretty tremendous attack happening here. So bishop, knight 3. So let me see here. He has to retreat back. This has a dual purpose of attacking the bishop with tempo and also developing the queen. So it's actually a pretty good move that Pillsbury played. Bishop to d2, with the idea of trying to potentially win a with a skewer. Rook knight 1, that takes care of that. But now black can't castle kingside, so he's in a kind of bit of a quagmire there. Bringing the rook into the attack, and also forcing bishop to b3, which would win the rook if it remained on the same diagonal as the queen. So that's kind of why he did that. Now he has the ability of playing e5, and the queen's under fire. This bishop's optimally placed. So it's an interesting game, to say the least. So there, queen to h6, or queen rook 3, as they have in the English notation. Pawn queen, let me see, pawn rook 4 here. He's trying to trap this bishop on b6. Knight check. Knight takes knight. Pawn takes knight. Bishop b4 or bishop c3, clearing the back rank and enabling the queen to defend the threat of mate. So pawn takes. Oops. Sorry about that. A little too hasty on that. Bishop takes first. And then pawn takes bishop. Now this is defended. So it defends the mating threat. Pawn to g5. Or pawn g4, I mean. Pawn to b4. Bishop f2. Forcing the exchange because this actually would be mate, so the rook has to actually take at this point. Pawn takes, and then queen takes pawn. But you have to always remember, we'll stop right here for just a second, and you have to always look at, yes, white's down an exchange if you think about it, but look at the vulnerability of black's king. There is a chance that we can mobilize our pieces, and black hasn't even developed his queen side. So in theory, Pillsbury's still okay with his piece development. It is slightly better because of being an exchange up. That black does have a pretty good counterplay, and in 2 moves could castle. Pawn to g3. Queen to d2. Knight to queen 2, and he's going to try to get his king castled. Pawn to e6. Aggression to the last. Pillsbury tries to get counterplay going for it. So pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn, and knight to b4. Bishop c4. This threatens to actually play e7. So rook queen 1, or rook queen 8 to d8, or to d8. Queen to g2, and then knight to e4. And boy, this is not looking good for Pillsbury. Of course, the knight can't be taken, because if of course, you see what would happen, mate in 1. Let's see here. Rook king b1. to queen 8 here. Rook to d1. The final blow. This is a forcing line right here. If rook takes rook, knight check, king knight 1, pawn takes check, king takes knight, and rook takes queen, king takes rook, and then queen to knight 3, which with a check, and white can't avoid the loss of massive material with a infiltration attack here. And if he takes, of course you have a couple different lines that you could go down. You can potentially check here when he comes there, then you grab this. So rook d1 was played, bishop to king e1. I gotta promote that to the main line. Rook takes bishop, rotates rook, and now the knight comes in. I check there. This pawn takes the forcing move. It takes, rotates queen. King takes rook. Queen takes. He played queen takes the bishop pawn, which because the rook is on a altogether different color now, our plan of being able to basically come here and then come there to pick the rook off here is no longer available. So he's now going to take the pawn and protect his queening pawn, the h2. Bishop king 2, or bishop e2, and queen to d2. And white resigned here. This was a resignation. And the young Marshall beat a blindfolded Pillsbury. And he has a continuation line. If pawn takes, queen takes rook, or if he says there's another continuation, if king f2, then queen takes rook check, king takes, and then you make a new queen with check. And you're doing nothing but domination. So now that we've gone over that, let's get on to our let's get on to our puzzles. Okay. Okay, the board. Oops. Queen, pawn, knight, rook, pawn, nothing. So do, 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 do. Okay, we got the pawns for white. Let's get the pawns for black. Let's get the bishop and then the king. Knight, rook, knight, bishop, queen, king, bishop. This is it. White to mate in 2. There you go. What happens if he plays knight e7? What happens if he plays knight e7? What's your, what do you have? Ah, yeah, there you go. There we go. Just had to throw in another mate there. Another 2 mates. Another 2 mates. Mate 2 for white. There you go. There you go. Okay, dokie. Next, onward and upward. Next. Oops, sorry, 1 second. Forgot a knight. There we go. Mate 2. There we go. Very similar one. Then sorry, just a little itch there. White to move. Oops, I have to white to move. There you go. Nice work there. Yeah, because you'd have to play here. He plays there, and then you have a mate there, and if he intercepts, you did all the other stuff you were talking about. So, great job there. Okay, and then white to mate 2. Double the threat, double the attack. That's what we ask. Come on. see here. Okay, let's do the pawns. Bum 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 bum. Nothing there, so we have a knight, two knights. Sometimes bugs are irritating and they buzz around me. It's like, ugh, irritating. Okay, oops, don't flip the board. White to move. I forgot pawns here, so they don't really much do anything though, so it's okay. Yeah, I need a fan for sure. For sure, for sure. There were pawns here, so yeah. Yeah, queen takes, king takes, and then rook d8. Yep. Okay, here, there, pawn here, the king's over here, the queen's right there, rook's right here, rook's right there, king is here, knight, queen, there we go. That should be. Oh, let me get that. Let me see if that's right. Yeah. That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. And everything's right. So white to move and mate in two. Yeah. Isn't that interesting? How that this type of forcing move actually works. Uh-oh. No. Forgot to put my marker in. Where did we leave off? Here we go. It's a good thing I made a mark. So sometimes. Excuse me. Okay. Oops. Alright. Shift them around. Shift them around. Shift them around. Okay. Now I need one rook and two rooks there. Where? Okay, we don't need anything there. We need to get this opened up. Bring it on. Got a little too greedy for his own good. Got a little too greedy. Got a little bit too over greedy. Yep, there we go. White to mate 2. Maybe a second to think about this. Let's see here. There you go. Nice job, and you got it. So let's see, where are we at now? Okay. you have been? That's good to hear, because oops, I want to take that away. Get rid of that. Put a king there, put a pawn there. Hey, how you doing? Let's see there. There we go. There we go. Okay, it's time. It's white to move. This one's an interesting one. You're gonna have to be a little patient. You just gotta be patient with it. It's a patient move. I'll see if you can see this one. This is kind of a little bit of a well, that's good. You know what? Strive. Never stop striving for that. Never stop striving for that. Oh, nice. I think almost any move wins, even this move. Any move kind of wins with this takes here. So, good job on finding that. You know what? Never stop striving for greatness. Rating is a wonderful thing to acquire. So I'm glad you're have a lot of enthusiasm about doing that. I'm gonna clear the board because there's just too much mess there. Well, I gotta say I can't take it really the credit. It's the Lord that has actually helped me throughout all this to get, first of all, to get this stream started was part of His work, you know, and that you're coming on and spending time is what the Lord has for me to do to use my talents. We have to, like what it says, as is written about the talents, we have to use our talents for good. Okay, white to move. But I appreciate the compliment, but you know what? That's and I want one thing I have to remember is it's written that also you have to give tribute to whom tribute, honor to whom honor. And so a lot of what I've learned is from my teacher who has passed on to be with the Lord. Oh yeah, wow. This is the Morphe game, isn't it? Actually, it's called the Opera game. It's called the Opera game. He was facing a Duke and an Earl, I think. Yeah, this was Morphe was facing they called themselves the Alliance because it was a Duke and an Earl, and they were facing Paul Morphe. See, he was at the opera, and they had an intermission, and so they played a game while at break of the opera. And so this was actually played while they were waiting for the next scene to be played. I believe it was a duke and an earl, but they called themselves like the Alliance or something like that. Some sort of, because they both were working together and they were talking about moves. And Morphy ended up beating both of them. So, yeah, you know what? That tells you right there. It doesn't matter how many people, how many players you bring together. If you have a winning game, you can have as many players. But if you have a winning game, that's all that matters. Okay, hold on. Did I? Yeah, the opera game. We did the opera game already. Okay. I knew that game reminded me of something that I had priorly looked at. There's the gold coin. There's a game called the gold coin, and it was such a beautiful game that they said that somebody tossed a gold coin on the table. That was what that was some of the historical that they were saying. I don't know. I know they had the immortal. They had the immortal game too. They had a lot of interesting. Let's see. Is this? Do I have that right? I think I got that right. Yeah. There's a lot of things when you climb up for the grandmaster title that you'll be exposed to. So it's a great responsibility to have a lot of knowledge on board. Then they have the Evergreen game. You'll learn about that. And then you'll also learn about Bobby Fischer had a game when he was like, I think 14, and he traded 3 minor pieces for the queen, and he did a beautiful mate. So you'll learn a whole bunch of games like that. Lots and lots. Alright, let's see. I think we got this one now. Yeah. Oops, I forgot my king. That would help. That would help. So, white to mate 2. Yep. One more. One more, and then we start our endgame studies. Yeah, loving it. We gotta love the endgame. Yeah. Let's see if I have this right. Yep. Yep. Yes. 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 And then yes. Okay. White to move. Now I get to erase it and go to the next page. Pages. There we go. Boom, 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 boom. Okay. sure I have this set up right. Hold on. Just want to make sure. Yep, that's set up right. Queen takes. Bishop takes, and then rook takes. Yep. Alright, now it's time for our endgame. Let's do it to it. And go on through it. Great job, team. We're doing good. Okay. Now we're going to be doing something called pawns on one side of the board. In the various majority of endgames, the defender's drawing chances are improved with a pawn trade. This is certainly the case of a rook endgame, where one side has an extra pawn, but all the pawns are situated on the side of the board. The defensive ideas are based on trading as many pawns as possible, unless striving for particular pawn exchanges. Several weaknesses. Sometimes pawn exchanges will severely weaken your formation, so be careful. Even if you want to trade down, make sure that your trades don't weaken you and actually set up for an attack. Keep the rook as if you have one rook and like pawns on one side of the board, keep your rook as active as possible. Trying to defend, basically stop the king, because we talked about it. If black had a king here, a good spot for the rook would be to cut the king off. A good spot would be like right here for it would cut the king off from advancing any further down the board. That's kind of what he's talking about. And then the next one is keep trading down till you end up with a Philidor's position, which we know from experience is a simple draw. Well, we're going to be doing, he's going to be talking about a rook and 2 versus a rook and 1. In the position where 2 versus 1, the difference is on one side of the board, the game is usually drawn if the stronger side doesn't have a passed pawn. Nevertheless, even in a non-passed pawn situation like the E and the F versus the E and an F versus the F pawn, the defense can still be difficult in the over-the-board practice. Just because something is theoretically drawn doesn't mean it's easy to acquire. The simplest 2 versus 1 situation to draw a king rook H and G versus a king rook and G pawn. However, even here, good players have been known to botch the defense and go down in flames. Unfortunately, in cases where one side does have a passed pawn, those endgames often prove far more complex than one might imagine. For example, if one side has a passed pawn as in an E or F versus G, the stronger side has a serious winning chances. There are several reasons for this. 1. The stronger side's king will enjoy more cover than its black counterpart. 2. The stronger side can use his greater force to push the opponent back and ideally win the defender's remaining pawn. 3. The stronger side can push his pawn to the 5th or 6th rank, exchange a pair of pawns, end up with a favorable rook and pawn versus rook situation where the weaker side hasn't been allowed to create his ideal defensive setup. Oh, I have, oops, that's right. I have the, okay, good. I have Jeremy Silman's endgame course. Okay, and then 4, the pass pawn will always be threatening to go somewhere, basically down the board, forcing the defender to deal with that on top of everything else. So this is Jeremy Silman talking personally here. I've met very few players under 2400 who have mastered these difficult 2 versus 1 on the same side of the board situation, and why should they? The defensive technique is hard to acquire, and are actually learned. Basically, that's what he's saying. And I find that most of the positions need help. So like if you're in an end game and it's on one side, common sense is what he's saying kicks in, an accurate calculation and a good knowledge of more basic positions to draw. So if you have more of the endgame positions on board, you'll have a greater understanding of what you're moving your forces to. Well, US dollars, it's 24.95. So it was a pretty big expense. I purchased some books from a couple. This is a long time ago when I did some OTB, over the board. I won a couple pots of money in it, so I purchased some books. So, but it does. Some of the books do cost. So. As a result, I would leave the reader to study these complicated situations if and when he feels the need to do so. Personally, I strongly feel that such an in-depth study of complex specifics is a waste of time for more players in the expert and even low master class. So having said that, we can still acquire a basic understanding of many 2 versus 1 situations by making use of the simple defense flowchart. Don't allow a lost rook 1 versus position to occur. This usually means that the defending king gets trapped on the side and can no longer prevent a Lucinda from materializing. Or it can mean that the defending king is passively placed. Trade a pawn and get a Philidorus position. That's what he says. King and pawn endgames might occur. You'll need to make occasional use of your knowledge of the Trebuchet. That's like, I think, a German word, I believe. I don't know how to pronounce it very well, so I just spelt it. If you're going to do well in cases like this, you'll need to know the drawing techniques for the failed Philidorus position found in part 4. So we'll probably have to, when we're done with the book, we'll probably have to go back over and just do a refresher again. Just refresh by going to our studies and talking about the positions so we can get a good understanding of the position. Let's take a few positions and let's show how all these things might occur from a simple rook versus 2 and a rook versus 1 endgame. All right, now we get to do some studies. Yeah, you know what? You got to read what Jeremy Silman says. Otherwise, you're not going to. I know it was a little kind of dry there, but you got to have a good understanding of where he's going, because if you just dive into the position without reading kind of a little bit of a beginning knowledge, you're not going to know where he's wanting us to go with the position. 1 second, I can get a drink. Alrighty. A study. So this is a 2 versus 1. And game course. Alright, down we go. Alright, I'm on. Rook. And 2 versus rook and 1. I'm rook and 1. Okay, king to g5. This frees the f pawn and allows it to advance. Once it gets to f5, it will put the big squeeze on the black king. So this will put a big squeeze. He played king c5. An important move that intends to chop off the e5 pawn if f4 is advanced. Trying to acquire this rook so it can check from a distance doesn't work. So if you were trying rook c1, this is actually a complete mistake, a complete blunder, and it actually loses the entire game, a distance check. Trying this position occurred in an actual game. This actually occurred in a game. White showed his confusion with when he played actually this move. He played a6, which was a question mark. So he did a blunder with a mistake. Failing to take advantage of black's error, instead white can force a win by, rather than doing that, he could have actually forced a win with rook b8. This is actually a not exclam, sorry, I better take that away. Would be king e8, and then f5, rook h1, rook b8 check, king e7, and then not d7, then f6, king d7, and of course you see if king comes here that this also loses on the spot because he has to actually come down the board now. And in theory you can make a, you got to be careful, but and if he takes, then you have acquired somewhat of a Lucinda position, and you can actually now hide behind the pawn and get it queened. So king d7, rook f8 to chop the pawn, rook h7. This is that's one ugly rook, he says. And how else can black defend f7? So king e let's see, hold on. King g4 is an exclam. This creates Zugzwang since any black rook move allows rook takes. Any king allows rook to e8, followed by rook e7. So king c7 was played, rook e8, and now rook e7 is going to be played, and followed by e6 and that type of an attack. So king c5, our rook's there, and then b8 check. White actually gave black a chance to defend. There was a game that was played. It was Marcus versus Len Harta, Poland, 1993. White gave black a chance with a6, and only checked after b5 basically. Rook a7 check. When the game was agreed to a draw, eventually White didn't realize that there was still a lot of tricky chess to be played, though perhaps the fact that it was already move 91 and the board was set up, and they probably were tired, and they just basically decided a ceasefire at this point. King f8 actually is not here. Here, king f8 is actually an exclam mark at this point. Queen e6 is actually a blunder. So if you played king e6, sorry, f5, and then if king takes, rook e7 check, king d6, and then rook takes, leads to a winning rook and pawn versus rook position where black can no longer get in front of his pawn because this rook is here. So f5 was actually played here. King h6 doesn't really do anything either because rook c6 check. And how does he could play king h7, and f6 lets black trade pawns in a favorable circumstance where white's king is partially offside, and this could be an easy draw. So white just decided to play and then so the rook took, and then king f6. Now he's attacking the rook, so the rook's going to have to retreat back. Actually, it doesn't have to retreat back. You could play rook e1, and then you can take at this point check. And there's also, if you tried this, I think it's a draw too as well. It's nothing for white after takes. And king takes, nothing for white. Actually occurs king g7. And if queen e7, this actually is a mistake here, and e6, and black finds himself in a winning position where white's in Zugzwang, and he just comes down the board and wins. And we've explored this in part 4 of our endgame. So king g8, rook g7 check, king h8, and rook to b7. Rook f1 is interesting as well. This key idea ties down white's king to the defense of the pawn and also prevents the pawn from advancing after rook to b8 check. So king to e6 was actually played. But if white tried b8 check and king h7, really there's not much he can do. So this is kind of what he tried. He's threatening now to push f6 and get a Lucinda position. If he checks here, so the king actually goes to g8, king f6. If we tried, come on, why is it stalling on me now? Not again. Okay, good. If we tried, okay, it's reconnecting. If we tried, oops. If we tried f6 here, there's no place really for the king to hide, and there's no spot for the king to hide, and he'll just constantly be checked, and it's hopeless for white. So he tries with king to f6, rook f2, waiting move. Why not king g6 instead of king e? Well, I think the whole point would be if you did here, if this is what we're talking about, I think that black would just check, and if he came up, then So I'm thinking a check would have to actually occur at this point. He comes up, and then I'm not sure if this is actually winning now. I think this is for white winning. Oh, that's why. A skewer. Sorry. It's he can't come up the board after that because I forgot about this little trick. This is a little trick that you got to be careful of if you're white, that you don't get a little too greedy, because you'll get this trick dropped on you in your OTB over the board. So just be very careful, and that's why he went king e6. Okay, so we're on move 9. Rook b8 check, king h7, rook f8 check. Yeah, I know what you meant. You're not a problem. Remember what this threatens? This threatens to play king e7, and then if he comes over to g7, now we have two protectorates of f6, so we can actually push the pawn. It doesn't stop it, so we're Operation Go. So he plays rook a2 for, this is distance checking. He's going to check the king from a distance, and this is an exclam. This creates a lot of distance checks and threatens to enter a dead drawn Philidor's position. With if we tried rook here, we can actually play potentially check. If rook comes here, you now can have a Philidor's type of position. If he plays there, you can actually now get potentially your king involved here. and you just bring your king over, and now you're going to get your king in front. And the only way to stop it would be there, but then you have check, and so you'd have to come there. And we don't want to trade, so we do want to trade. We can actually play here, and then if he takes pawn push, we've entered a drawn endgame. Draw. So rook a2 and rook e8 and rook f2 is actually an exclam move. So this is actually a promote the variation. This is actually a better variation. F2 is better. Got to remember that. Okay, white can't make any progress because every time white tries to play rook f8, black's just going to play rook a2, and then when he plays back, it'll just be a threefold repetition. We've seen that the stronger side's chances in a rook versus 2 versus 1 are based on pushing his pawn to the 5th, which creates a squeeze against the defending king, and pressure against the weaker side's final pawn. With this in mind, the defender can't wait passively for his opponent to tighten, basically, he says, the screws up, or put the finishing nail in the finished wood, or you could say the final pike in the railroad to complete the railroad, or however you want to say it. And he can't wait for that to happen. So you have to basically push with all your might. Don't give them any chance to breathe. You want to make sure that they don't get a chance to even consolidate their advantage. And you have to do that throughout the entire. You have to be the one to push. You can't play passive. Move 14. Oops, 1 second. We don't have move. We didn't go to move 14. This was it was a sub variation that I was working on. So it's okay. Not to worry. We have to now get to our next puzzle. So yeah, it's just we only went to move 12. There is no move 14. I would go back to I would go to move 14, but there's only 12 moves in the position. So let's get this set up here. Okay, pawn. Where's the black king? Here, 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 and here. We're going to make this into a study. hold on. Would you consider this a draw or a win for white? A draw or a win? Make sure that, okay. What is your take on this position? Are you sure? I'm going to give you a little bit more time to look at it, probably one more minute. And I want you to think about what we just went over, and I want you to remember what we talked about the active king and the active rook, and what black's kind of plan is. And then I'll start right now, but I just wanted to show you, I wanted to talk to you about that. Okay. I want to make sure that, hold on. One side of the board. Ah, perfect. Oops, it's black to move. Ah. How do I switch it so black can move? Ah. I have to make it black to move. Oops, wrong one. There we go. Hold on. He actually plays this move here, and it's all over. If black played rook f7, then what would happen is it would actually be considered a blunder, and he would run into c5, and the idea of there'd be no way for, as Jeremy Silman would call it, the deep freeze is now off the table. See, we get to use all the knowledge that we have acquired from all the chapters. This is in chapter, I believe, 2. We talked about the deep freeze, and this is a deep freeze move when one pawn stops 2 pawns. So this is considered a deep freeze. Now, And now we're going to get to go over another one. Let's see how we're doing on time, so I can see. I want to make sure we have enough time to go over another one. Yep, we got enough time. Okay. Excuse me. Now, white to move, and this is is this a draw for white or a win for white? A draw or a win for white? With your endgame understanding that we've acquired so far, what do you see here? First of all, what do you see here that if black is to if white is to play g5, what's black gonna do here if white plays g5? What is black gonna do here if g5 is played? Pawn g5. What's black gonna play? Actually, you take this way. Oh yeah, you take with the rook, right? Exactly. And so, what is this called? What is this setup called? Because I want to see what your how your endgame understanding is going. What is this? What is this position called? This position has a name. I'll give you one. That's if it's a rook pawn. That's only if it's a rook pawn. That's only if it's a rook pawn over here. That's good. I'm glad you remembered that. That's good. That's if it's a rook pawn. But this is a f pawn. So what would this one be called? But good job on remembering the Van Keur position. That's good. It's a very similar type of setup, but it has a different name because it's not a rook pawn. Van Keur was the one who solved the ability to draw a rook pawn with the rook, of course, in front of it and not behind it. Just think of the name. Just I'll give you one more minute, and then I'll give you a list of names. I'll ask you what you think of, and then you can choose then. Give you one more minute. Okay. There's the Lucinda. Is it a Lucinda position? Yeah, that too. Is it a Lucinda position? Is it a Philindor's position? Or is it a Van Cura position? What position is this for black? A Lucinda, a Philindor's position, or a Van Cura position? Cura position. There you go. That's right. It's a Philindor's position. That's right. Yep. Isn't it Lucinda? That's right. That is right. Great job. That's right. So, because the reason you're probably wondering, like, why are you quizzing me on this? Because it's unless see these positions arise in most of the advanced endgames, and a lot of players who are like the upper grandmasters and IMs know the how to set up Philindor's positions, Van Coor's positions, and a lost position, and if they're winning, they know how to set up for a Lucinda. And so I'm just gonna every once in a while I'm gonna keep you on the toes. I'll ask you some questions so that I can keep this so that you're not just passively learning, you're actively learning, you're participating. And that's what my teacher always did with me is he said that I want you to participate rather than just me teach you. I'm going to teach you, and then I'm going to get to a point, and I'm going to ask you questions so that you're part of this, so that your learning experience will improve. And so I've incorporated that into our play. So our studies, rook d5. Otherwise, black just moves his rook back and forth along the fifth rank. Rook a4 was actually played at this point. You should know that the rooks that lead to you should know trading rooks lead to an easy one game. So if trades here, this is what Jeremy Silman has it worked out. King f7, king f5, e7, d6 check, exclam. Sacrificing the outside pass pawn so that if king f5, d7, king here, we queen, he takes, we take, the king has to go e, and then g7, and then we've acquired the goal of stopping the king from moving any further, and it's resignable for black at this point. At this point, though, there's still chance. And the reason rook a4 was played, the move a4 pins the e-pawn and leaves white with no useful way to improve his position. g5, if f takes g5, king takes g5, and then king f6, and black will get a Pfeffendorf's position as in part 4. Or if things get out of hand, a Pfeffendorf's position gone wrong in part 7, either of which are easily drawn. Let's see here. What's the time? Okay, we got plenty of time. We're gonna go into a rook versus a rook versus 4, a 3, or sorry, a 3 versus 2 pawn setup. This common endgame is also drawn if black has prevented white's pawns from eating up too much space. The space gaining pawns would result in black's king being pushed back and his pawns being vulnerable. Black is doomed because white. Right here. Here we go. I better put it in, otherwise you won't be able to see what doomed black. Yep, exactly. That is right. If trading, then white would win in the prior one. Yes, you are 100% right. This is what he says: white to move, black's worst nightmare. Black is doomed because white's pawns are far too strong. Usually this kind of thing is caused by passive defense. He says usually this setup here is caused by black passively defending rather than actively doing something about it. Oh, drat, I have the king in the wrong spot. Darn it. Sorry about that. That was my bad there. I have to delete this. Now he's doomed because he can get he goes king to h5. This prevents g6, king g6, and also prevents f6 from happening. So rook d8 has to be played. White threatens a back rank mating setup with see if now this type of a setup would happen and the king would have to go back and then you'd have a back rank mate. So black has to play d8 now. There's a threat of f6 to f5 or f5 to f6 check, and that's what's played. So king can't go to h6. King goes to g, king h6, and rook b8. Black is helpless since any rook move off the back rank allows rook to a8 checkmate. So rook a7, rook e8, and the threat is actually to play e6, and so he has to actually play this. The threat would be to play e6 and trade off and then basically win the game. So even though e6 was play, or e8 was played rook e8, pawn e6 is an excellent move by white. Black has no experience in this setup, and if he plays rook takes here, then rook a8, and it would lead to checkmate. Or if he plays this move here, f takes this, I'll promote this because this makes more sense. F takes, then f7 check, and the king, it's basically curtains for black, because he can just take at this point. King takes, rook take, king takes h, and he has to stay on the back rank. Yeah, he'll stay in the back rank, then the king will come in and gobble this pawn up. So it's curtains. Now we'll go over one more puzzle. One more study. A quick one, and then then I got a log for the night. What Jeremy Silman said about the prior one: don't play passively and let the superior side's pawns march down the board and eat every bit of space they can up. So don't let them be, you know how we said a rook's Pac-Man? Pawns in an endgame are like Pac-Man. They eat up all the space that the king could go to, and eventually your king is smothered and gone. So number one here, moving the king and rook out, moving the king and rook out of the way, and playing c5 and then c6 sets up for the same position that we had last time, but a couple moves a little bit later on. Okay. Rook e6. Oh no, don't tell me it's black to move. Oh no. I have to fix that. Thought it was white to move. I'll have to delete this. Fine. I'll delete that and then set up a delete this here. There we go. Now we got it fixed. So rook e6, an important move to e6, since in the line when white plays c6, potentially c6, it's a check along the back rank would occur. So if black moved back and the king moved here, we have a back rank mate set up. So rook c1. Forced, since if rook b2, then we can actually set up basically a distance check. He'll try to set up distance check, but it doesn't work. By trying to come over here and getting in, it doesn't work. Rook e8 is actually played here, and this is an exclam move. This forces black's rook to c2 and c3 when it won't have any checks to boot. So c2. There is a line where if rook g1, rook e7, king b8, king c6, rook g6, rook e6, rook g8, and then c5, and we've accomplished our goal once again. Rook d8, and then rook e7, rook c7, and rook h8 or h7. And there's really nothing. If he moves his rook, we get to play our move. And if a6, if he plays a6, where is that? Hold on. Hold on, I gotta make sure. 8. A6. Trying to exchange. B takes A. Oh, wait a second. Sorry. Now I'm back here. If he tries A takes, what this is in line as well. King takes, and then rook b8, and we're setting up a trap for him. And this is like a Lucinda position, but a really good Lucinda position for us. So rook e1 is a exclam. Preparing to pull the white king away from c5. I mean, to pull the white king away from c5. Now the black rook doesn't have access to the first rank. So this is an exclam. Yeah, hey. So rook c3 is forced, and then king to d4. Now the king could attack the rook. So rook c, and then rook to d3, and then rook h2, and now we get to play c5. And we've accomplished our goal successful. White's pawns have acquired their dream position. Rook h3, king d4, rook h4, rook e4, rook h7, rook e8, rook h4 check, king c3, and now we're going to try to hide here. Hey, how you doing? Play the grub. Rook h5, king to b4, and surprisingly he played a5, which is an exclam move. If he plays this move here, he loses on the spot because of king sorry, not king. That would have actually drawn the game. So c6, and when he comes up here, this would be mate on b8. So here we take, rook takes d, c6, a7. So he clears the spot for a7, and then now black plays an outstanding move. I mean, white plays an outstanding move, e7, and he's now locked the king down to the defense. So king actually has to go back to b8, and then this gives the a6 square to white now. Rook d8 is forced because of the back rank mate threat, and then b3 is winning on the spot. Pawn not b3, b6. Pawn b6 is winning on the spot. Rook c8, and what eventually is going to potentially happen is you can actually take at this point. The continuation goes that no better is actually pawn takes because of this fork we talked about already. And we'll read the end of this, and then we'll talk. Clearly, the defender can't allow his opponent's pawns down the board in his fashion, the stronger side. However, by strategically placing the black pawn so that any white advance leads to smothering exchanges, the game will usually be saved without much difficulty if you can actually do that. Now, we're not going to do it. We'll save it for tomorrow. But we've got another rook 3 versus 2. So we'll save it for tomorrow. This. Do you have any questions before I log off? I know it is, isn't it? But hey, be blessed, and I'll see you tomorrow. What's this? A game? Okay. Let's take a look real fast. And then I gotta log because I get a little too into it. Let me see. Here we go. Why isn't this coming up? There we go. Come on. Alright. Be blessed and have fun at school. You know what? School's always fun. Alright, finally. Okay. D4, E5, D takes E5, C. So let's see. So you're white. You're white, okay. Alright, there, so. Oh, you're playing a gambit? That black's playing a gambit. h3. So f4, bishop f4. Oops, I have to enlarge this. 1 second. This is kind of a little, kind of small. There we go. Now it's bigger. c3, g4, knight d, takes, pawn takes. I'm thinking you could just take here and then play yep. I think though you could have just taken his bishop and done this too as well. And then if he checks, but I think you'd have to be careful here. That queen, sorry, e3 is a bad move. Queen e3 is actually better, because then if he checks, you can now block with g3. Otherwise, it's a perpetual. The other line, this line is actually perpetual. You wouldn't be able to make any progress. So you have to play at that point this, and then you're still not the best, because you're actually doing he's got his pawn back, so you're kind of forced to play e3 here. This is a forced setup. Otherwise you'd lose your pawn that you acquired through a gambit. f5. I don't know. I think I would have just taken, played queen, and then moved my queen over and said, so what you gonna do? And if he tries to retreat out, just develop. And if he brings his queen back to guard, well then now you just move your king, and you're the one that's going to be attacking on g7. So yeah, that's true. There's a lot more ways to now you can acquire another pawn. That's a sweet tactic. If he takes there, you can actually take. Let me see if there's anything forcing here. Let's see if takes. Ah, he's got this pawn there. Okay. Okay, I was just looking to see if there's any forcing moves. Thinking, let me see. So knight takes. Check. No, still nothing. Okay, I was just seeing if there's anything forcing. I think knight blocks would have kind of. It's still, I think, is mate, so maybe rook blocks. But then you can actually take at this point, and after it takes, it's mate, so. Yeah, it's just winning. So, do you have any questions on it? Do you have any questions on the game before I log off? That was an excellent game. Well played. Well played. Oh. So, good job on that. That was an excellent game. Okay. Then, if there's no questions, I will say adieu. The diamond structure and how to use it. Yeah. You did good on that for sure. You did good on using the diamond formation, the Grandmaster formation. But what we have to do is remember that every long journey begins with one small step. And so that's our, and then we become what we think about. So if you think you can, you will. If you think you can't, you won't. Either way, you're right. Then there's what Bruce Lee says: knowing is not enough, you must apply, and willing is not enough, you must do. So you also need. He also said that there are no limits, there are plateaus, and you must not stay there. You must go beyond the plateau. He has another quote that I really like. That he said that if he didn't fear the person who practiced 10,000 different kicks. He feared the person who practiced one kick 10,000 times, because when they landed that kick, it was over. We have a chess cruncherism as well, that don't give up, get up. We also have, one second. We also have a chess cruncher ism again, that always put on your Grandmaster glasses and never forget them at home. You know what? You never want to go home without your Grandmaster glasses. And let me see. I think I'm trying to think if there's one more. Oh yeah. Well, yeah, I like to knuckle down and get back up, but I forgot to put that in there. But you know what? One thing we need to remember always is that the Lord's in control. He's the King of Kings, Lord of Lords, and if you remember to bring him into the game, you're not always going to win, but you're going to have a fun time. You're going to be able to teach others chess and share the Lord with them. And that's what truly matters. And you know what? Chess is fun, and we're going to study more of our endgame puzzles, and we're going to be going over Marshall's best of Marshall's games, his chess games. But as always, what do we do when I remember what my mother, father, my grandma, and grandpa taught me was that you can only spend a second once. and where do you want to spend it. And when you're spending it properly, and I know you're a chess cruncher, and most of your friends are playing and doing the other stuff, and they should be doing chess like how you're doing chess, and they come over and say, "What you doing?" You can say, "I'm a chess cruncher." And if they haven't heard it said, "What's a chess cruncher like a Tigger?" You can say a chess cruncher hangs up their coat, they hang up their hat, they sit down and study when most won't. A chess cruncher does. And that makes all the difference. And as Wesley so says through the Lord Jesus, as I say, God bless, and I'll see you next time on Chess Cruncher TV. Have a blessed morning, afternoon, and evening, and Lord willing, I'll be back on tomorrow, and we'll keep pushing forward, learning, honoring the Lord, and having fun in chess and improving. 2 thumbs up. Great job, Team Chess Cruncher. Hoorah. Be blessed. And I will see you tomorrow. Bye bye.